I want to talk tonight. It seems like this same stuff we've been talking about the last several weeks, at least I have in my talks that I do. And it's about still holding all this pain, all this grief, all the tragedy, all the violence that's happening in the Middle East, around the world, the shootings and the mass shootings here in the States, the other one in Maine. And it seems almost relentless at times. And I attended a talk by Larry Ward the other night. He is a wonderful teacher. He has been around for many years. I'm a great fan of his, and he's a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's. He's actually he worked with Thich Nhat Hanh for many years, and he's talked about. I mean, I'm always very inspired by his talks, and he said he had one line, and he said we need to thrive in a period of uncertainty, but it doesn't mean we're uncertain of our priorities. And that really landed with me because, yeah, we do live in a period of uncertainty. I mean, I think it's always uncertain. We think we know what's going to happen, but impermanence is always in play for everything. But to have a grounding that lends us some solidity is really important and really powerful. And it gives us a sense of priorities for our life and how we can operate and move through the world. And I want to talk about that and for me, it's been the teachings, the Buddhist teachings, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path primarily, because that's a kind of a way, it's a path to liberation, it's a path to freedom, and it's a path to live in harmony with others. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but it's a way to guide our lives. It's a way to have that certainty in our priorities. And so, one of the things that is also incredibly important that I got out of his talk was he talked about, the sense of community. And how we're not just doing this for ourselves. We're not just developing priorities so that I'm okay, but that we are connected. There's this sense of community that's so important. As a society, there's a lot of isolation in our society. I mean, even right now, we're sitting in these little Zoom boxes. And there's a couple of us that have company, whether human or animal, but a lot of us are sitting by ourselves. And Zoom is, I actually have been quite impressed by the sense of community that can grow in Zoom, but it's also important to recognize the sense of connection that is important for thriving. And I attended some other stuff last weekend with Larry Ward and his wife, Peggy Roe Ward, and there was somebody else, Joe Riley, who was singing a song, and he talked about, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about interbeing to point out the connectedness that we all have with each other, that we're not operating in a vacuum. And the singer said, we inter-are, which I really like, that this recognition that we are all together. And in Mahayana tradition, there's the idea of the bodhisattva who forgoes their own enlightenment until all beings are enlightened. They vow to, beings are numberless, I vow to save them all. So there's that sense of we're not just doing it for ourselves. And Larry Ward talked about the beloved community. It's not competition. It's not aggression. We're not here to be number one all the time, but we're here to support each other in our shared humanity. And I'm sure most of you know Larry Yang, and he wrote that wonderful book, Awakening Together. And he talks about beloved community, which is so important. And he says, beloved communities are envisioned as those that embody the values of love and justice in every aspect of their being, even when circumstances are difficult or oppressive. A beloved community assumes that all our lives are interrelated and the social nature of our humanity is not secondary to any other aspect of life. As Dr. King reminds us over and over again, we are tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And that is so easy to be lost these days. If you look at how people are behaving in the world, it's so much of what's going on is one party trying to gain power over another. It's always, got to be number one, got to be number one. I probably mentioned this before. My husband likes to watch those shows. I think it's on the History Channel or Discovery Channel, talking about the titans of industry, or the creators of candy bars, Mars and Hershey, and how one of them had really good, really successful business and company, but they needed to be number one. They needed to defeat the other guy. And I sit and I watch these things and I go, why? Why do you have to be number one? Why can't you just go, yay, we're making a good living. Yay, we're making a nice product. So it's that sense that we always have to be number one, which can be really damaging, It's self-centeredness run amok. And, how do we behave in this world? We have to recognize that we're part of it, not masters of it. Larry Ward says, let us be the earthlings we are, and give up our superiority. Last week in a Dharma talk I gave, I talked about dehumanizing and how easy it is to dehumanize the other. And the problem, there's a lot of problems with that, but one of the problems is that when we dehumanize another, we dehumanize ourselves. We cut ourselves off from connection by creating this story about them, and how we don't have to count them because they're not like us and they're them, they're over there. And it allows for all kinds of horrible circumstances. And as I mentioned, the Buddha gave us a roadmap in order to be in community with each other. He gave us the Eightfold Path, which Bhikkhu Bodhi says is a way to live in harmony with others. And it's especially the one part of the Eightfold Path, sila, ethical behavior, how to live with integrity. That's where you have the precepts. And I'll talk about those a little bit more as well. This Eightfold Path offers us a life that is grounded in a wise heart. There's wisdom and clarity, and there's compassion. We're not just one or the other. We have the ability to respond as appropriate, which is one of the definitions of equanimity. An appropriate response to whatever shows up, which is what the beauty of the beginner's mind practice is you let go of all the extraneous stories, the conditioning, the baggage we carry, and say, what is this? So you begin to release yourself from reactivity and really come into connection with the experience of the moment. And what's the right way to be? What's the right way to respond right here and right now? That's what we're working towards, to be fully present in our lives, to be fully present and grounded, to be grounded in our priorities. And I always like to ask when we're talking about things, like if we're talking about how to live a life with integrity, how to live a life of harmony, how to develop a wise heart, an undefended heart, what gets in the way of everything? What gets in the way? What ideas do we hold on to so tightly that we can't loosen them to be kind to each other? And how easy is it for me to demonize and call a group of people they? It's really easy. Even if I'm intentionally not wanting to do that, I can have some kind of reaction against somebody or something because of, I think they shouldn't be doing a certain thing, therefore I get to treat them like crap. or there's something else going on over here, and that allows me to not pay attention to what I'm doing and be rude or unkind or whatever. That is what we want to recognize. What gets in the way, and how easy it is for me to slip into that. And one of the things I want to say right now, it's because it's an important caveat. It's, I was talking last night that Buddhism sometimes has the rap of being, oh, we love everyone, and that means we can't be mean, la la la. And that's not true. It's a practice that is about accountability as well. It's like, oh, you're doing that, and I'm not going to demonize you because that's not what I'm supposed to do. It's like, no, we call people out on things that if people are causing harm, we work to end that. We work to stop that. It's not about saying, oh, like, you don't demonize the person. You recognize their humanity. You don't deny their humanity. But you also recognize that what they're doing is not okay and needs to be stopped. So I really want to say that, because people get such a bizarre idea of Buddhism. I'm on the board of a nonprofit, and one of my old colleagues who was on the board, a rabbi, said I was the first Buddhist he met who didn't just sit on a cushion and meditate, but was actually, out there working for economic justice or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of us who do that. It's not all just sitting there breathing in and breathing out, working for ourselves. As Bhikkhu Bodhi says, he says we need to develop this equanimity. We need to develop these priorities and this foundation so we can go out into the world and take care of what needs to be taken care of. Work for justice for all beings. Work to end violence against any being. And so I don't get to decide who or what is worthy of kindness, who or what I get to greet with an open heart. It's part of what the Buddha invited us to do with these Eightfold Path. This Eightfold Path is a path to harmony with all beings, omitting none, as it says in the Metta Sutta. There's no teaching on superiority. There's no saying everybody except them. There's no except. There's no what if. There's no if only. And it helps us to loosen our attachment to these fixed ideas that we've grown up with because of the society we live in, because of what we've been taught, because of what we see on TV and read and social media. Social media will tell you how to believe, and then the next day it'll tell you to believe something different. So it's really be cautious around that. So we need to learn to be grounded. And for me, as I said, that's the Eightfold Path. And I want to talk about the different quality, the different factors of the Eightfold Path, because they're so incredibly important on how we move through the world. The first section is right view and right intention. And right view is recognizing our shared humanity. Recognizing that the Four Noble Truths, there is suffering, there is dissatisfaction, birth, death, loss. We all experience that. To recognize that's part of the human condition. And we often cause extra suffering. We often cause harm to ourselves and to others by wanting it to not be that way and trying to fix things, to have them be the way we want them to be. And that doesn't usually end well. When we chase pleasant all the time. Instead, we're invited to let go and be with. So to see clearly that things are impermanent as well. Everything passes, everything changes. How much do we suffer and struggle and we want to hold on to stuff? There's a saying that says, everything I let go of has claw marks in it, because we hold on. Or do you ever do a tug of war, And then at the end of it, your hands are all like, shredded from holding on so tightly. Yeah, see if you can let go, not hold on. If you're banging your head against the wall, or if you've got claw marks and things, maybe you want to kind of ease up a bit and investigate, what is this? That's that question again. What is this? And then the second factor is wise intention. To set an intention to, there's three pieces of that. It's renunciation, which is not just being good for good's sake or not doing something just because, but to recognize what causes suffering in your life, what causes harm, what causes dissatisfaction, what is getting in the way, and can you let that go? Habits that are not helpful, habits of being quiet, or habits of, whatever it is. We all have different habits that we've developed, oftentimes as self-defense mechanisms, oftentimes as ways to armor ourselves against the world, but that maybe don't serve anymore. Like for me, learning to keep my mouth shut was really important growing up. Learning to just be a fly on the wall. But there comes a time and a place where just being a fly on the wall doesn't serve. And so to learn to be willing to let that go, as painful as it is to change habits, can you go through it to let go of what doesn't serve and bring something in that does serve? Rick Hansen talks about that. When we let something go, what can we bring in to take its place that's actually beneficial? And then we move, the rest of wise intention is to move through the world with friendliness and compassion towards all beings. Really can be challenging, but the Buddha talked about that again and again. And there's one sutta where he talks about this, and it's kind of in reference to one of the next factors was wise action, not intentionally killing or not intentionally causing harm. I'll just move into that, but it's also it kind of that wise action, not intentionally killing or causing harm, kind of builds on this moving through the world with kindness and compassion. And here it's talking about not that first factor or that first piece of wise action. Here, someone abandoning the killing of living beings abstains from killing living beings, with rod and weapon laid aside, gentle and kindly, he abides compassionate to all living beings. That's in one of the suttas. And the Buddha talks about that over and over again, how we abide with kindness and compassion and gentleness to all living beings. It didn't say all living beings except. It said all living beings. And that's the next piece of the Eightfold Path is sila, wise, ethical behavior, living with integrity, a real foundation of how to move through the world. Don't cause harm. And not just don't kill and don't cause harm, but cultivate compassion. Don't take what's not offered. Don't steal, not just stuff, but time, energy. Just don't take. Don't be an energy suck, and instead cultivate generosity. How can you be there for another? Can you listen to someone who needs to talk about something? Generosity of spirit, just, holding the door open for someone. Really, it doesn't take a lot. We often work from a place of lack. Well, if I give this, then what'll happen to me? And it's just do what makes sense in the moment. Again, that appropriate response in the moment. But if you cultivate not taking, or if you let go of not taking and cultivate generosity, that impulse will be there. You're creating the ground for being a generous person, for being a compassionate person, by looking at this and seeing where maybe you're a little stingy or a little greedy or a little clingy. Generosity is the antidote to clinging. And to cling is to suffer. And to be wise with our sexuality, to not cause harm in our romantic or sexual relationships. Really key. Really key. It can cause so much harm. I've caused so much harm. I've been harmed. I'm sure we all have. So how do you walk through life with harmony in that realm? And then another one of the factors of the Eightfold Path is wise speech. And not just speech, but communication. How do we communicate with others? The Buddha said, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it the right time? Is it kind? And what's your intention? Do you have a kind intention? Because we can tell the truth at the right time using kind words, but there's perhaps some ulterior motive. So really this wholehearted way of communicating with others. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to say something on social media, and then I said, is this actually necessary? And 99% of the time it isn't necessary, or butting into a conversation. I'm a butter inner and a jumper inner, so I have to really, really watch myself. I'm going to beg all your forgiveness right now, because I'm sure I'm going to, if we're talking to each other in person, I'm sure I'm going to do it, because I still haven't gotten that yet. I'm not dead, and maybe I'll get it before I die. Maybe I won't, but I'm going to try. Anyway, so to be wise with our communication. I heard something recently. I don't remember where I heard it, but they said if it's really important, if it's something that's really important, don't text or email, talk. Because that's really, because there's nuance gets lost in email and texting, so, or social media. So really be cautious about how you communicate. Letting go of sarcasm, letting go of harsh speech. So, and then right livelihood. How do you make your living? The Buddha was specific in particular things like butchering, I think, and a couple other things. But how do you work through making a living today that is not causing harm to yourself or to others? To cultivate living in harmony. And this is a challenging one, because we have to make a living as best we can. But to really let that be part of what you reflect on as you move through the world, because everything we do has ramifications. And then the last piece of the Eightfold Path is effort, mindfulness, and samadhi, collectedness of mind. It's often talked about as concentration, but it's really collectedness of mind. So effort, there's the four efforts to recognize when you're caught up in reactivity, when you're caught up in old habits, when you're caught up in maybe harsh speech or demonizing or dehumanizing someone else, and watch that. They say, there's a thing that people say, treat everyone else as if they were a Buddha and you weren't. They maybe give other folks the benefit of the doubt. So recognize when you're getting caught up in your stories and the habits of mind, and lost in this thinking, or lost in wanting, or greed, hatred, and delusion, getting lost in those three defilements that cause so much havoc in our lives and others' lives, and be willing to let go. So recognizing when you're caught up, and be willing to release that story, let go of that behavior, and then come back to the present and begin to cultivate a wise heart, an appropriate response, one that's not conditioned and reactive, but one that meets the moment. Oh, one other thing I want to say about wise speech, because it's really important. It's to not just, this is another thing that Buddhists get a rap for, that a bad rap that, oh, you can't say anything because they won't like it. It's not that you don't say things that people aren't going to like. You say it, you say what needs to be said. Like if people are doing things that are causing harm, you call them out on it. Absolutely. But you do it kindly. You do it with the parameters the Buddha laid out. You do it truthfully. You don't go at them with venom and harsh speech. And this stuff is not easy. But if you set an intention to move in that direction, let this be a groundwork. So that's what the effort is to recognize when you're caught up in not wise behavior or activities, and bring yourself back. And how do you cultivate a different way that's living in harmony and not causing harm? And then continue to cultivate that wise effort. And then mindfulness, which is ultimately the foundation of all of this stuff. Because if we're not paying attention, we're going to be doing whatever it is we're doing, you know. The fifth precept talks about not ingesting intoxicants or not ingesting drugs or alcohol that lead to heedlessness. Thich Nhat Hanh elaborates on that, but not by not ingesting, watching what we read, watching what we listen to. So that can lead to heedlessness as well, and mindlessness. So really to be present. What is this? What's going on right here, right now? What's the emotion? What's the feeling? Anger. Oh, look, there's anger coming up. So when we're mindful, we recognize perhaps when anger is arising. So then we don't just automatically react from anger, letting anger call the shots, but we let anger be present. We don't say, no, bad anger, go away. We make space for it. We greet our anger with kindness and compassion. And then we respond from wisdom and love to whatever's happening. So we have to have that mindfulness. And then the last one is the collectedness of mind, which I wrote down as rest in being. Just be fully present. Be right where you are, resting in this awareness of this moment. And so that is the Buddha's guide to moving through the world, moving towards freedom and liberation. It's a path towards releasing those things we hold on to. It's a path to awakening. And we hear it and we get it intellectually, but when we begin to put it into practice, it seeps down into our hearts. And so it's not just an intellectual memorization, but it begins to become how we move through the world, how we treat others and how we treat ourselves, because we're also part of this. We get to treat ourselves with kindness and compassion. We talk to ourselves kindly. We don't get to call ourselves names, because it's probably a lot of us are much more comfortable calling ourselves names than we are calling other people names. So we practice that to ourselves. And there's a couple of quotes that I really, really, really love that I want to read, that I think kind of put a postscript to this. And one of the most famous of the Buddha's sayings in the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada are these collections of very famous sayings. And one of the first ones is about hatred never ceases through hatred. Only through love or non-hatred does hatred cease. This is the eternal law. That's what the Buddha said that. Over 2,000 years ago. Hatred never ceases through hatred. So this piling on and piling on and piling on doesn't do anything except make it worse. Hatred is this, exaggerated form of anger, which is one of the poisons, the three poisons, the three defilements, that blocks us from being fully present. So let yourself be open to a different way. And then even Martin Luther King, who said very much the same thing, a lot of the time he said, I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. Because if you think about it, if you hate people, oftentimes the other person has no clue. You're the one who's suffering from it. You're the one who's carrying that fire in your belly or in your gut. It's unpleasant. So see if you can mitigate that in some way, shape, or form. And James Baldwin had a good quote. He said, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with the pain." And that, I believe, is so true, because if I have had an inkling to hate somebody or something, it's because I was hurt, or it hurts, whatever it was, hurt someone I love. And that's painful. And it's not often what we want to deal with. We don't want to deal with our pain. But the only way to be with pain is, the only way to work with it is to be with it, is to be willing to turn towards it. That's what this practice asks us to do, to be with. Sati means be with. It means mindfulness, but it also means be with. Be with the pain. And then we move from hatred to love. And Bell Hooks had such amazing quotes about love. She was a Buddhist practitioner, and she said, the moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. That action is the testimony of love as the practice of freedom. And when we choose to love, we choose to move against fear, against alienation and separation. The choice to love is a choice to connect, to find ourselves in the other. And, that's what I said at the outset, that one of the deepest needs we have is for connection. And the more we can begin to connect with that sense of love and compassion for ourselves. And this is why it's important, this practice is to practice with ourselves, is because if we can be compassionate with ourselves, it becomes easier to be compassionate with others. And it becomes easier to connect to others and less easy to dehumanize others. So this is incredibly important practice, an incredibly important practice. And finally, she said, to be loving is to be open to grief, to be touched by sorrow, even sorrow that is unending. We have to be willing to just be with, because we don't want to live in a way that causes harm, because we have our priorities set to live in this way the Buddha invited us to live in a way that offers freedom and liberation for all beings, omitting none. It's so incredibly important to reflect on this and to see how we work with it in our daily lives. And sometimes we might have a piece that is simple, and then there's other pieces that are incredibly hard. So just start where you are. Start where it's most challenging for you to be in the moment. That, or if there's suffering that's coming up again and again, can you turn towards that? That's where you want to start. Maybe there's a particular piece of the Eightfold Path that's applicable to that. Talk to someone else who's also on this path, because there's connection. We don't do this alone. So those are my thoughts, my friends, on how to live in harmony with ourselves, to live in harmony with others, and to walk through this world without causing harm, and to cultivate kindness and connection with all beings. So thank you so much for your kind and generous attention. And my friends, if there are any questions or
Yes.
comments. Thank you
Yes.
again for your generosity of time and listening, and remembering that we don't just practice for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. Thank you, my friend.